joining me now, Executive Director of Family Life New Zealand. Wynand Jacobs, kia ora, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Andrew. Kia ora.
When it comes to equity, we're not going to get into the politics of this, and I'm not going to ask you to flash your trade union card or anything like that. But the whole idea of equity, particularly in a Christian marriage, this is a deeply biblical idea, and certainly from the time of the early church, this was quite a countercultural idea, wasn't it?
Yeah, that is right. And look, I'd just lead this conversation by saying there's been a lot of things done unwell or like not in a great way in the past. And one of the things that particularly comes to mind is that God designed the world and he has a specific design element in mind. And I love the quote by, I think it was Dr. Miles Monroe who said, if design is unknown, abuse is inevitable.
Yeah.
But ever since the first man, Adam, instead of necessarily following God's design and his instruction, man desired to go his own way.
Yeah.
And that is called sin, according to the Bible, and it ultimately leads to destruction. And so when it comes to this equity topic, God actually has a master plan, but we have, as a maybe Christian culture, history, and non-Christian culture, we have messed this up in both directions over the past. So I just want to state that as a start.
No, so certainly. And it's not to say, oh, well, Christians are going to have great marriages because they're Christians and some of them have read the Bible. That in itself is no guarantee. However, something which does have some good results behind it is if you apply the principles of equity in the Bible, then the odds of having a better marriage go up, right?
Yeah, and so it's talking about that. There's the view that can get skewed, in terms of position and the term "the man is the head of the household" can sound like an insubordinate type of term, and one is better than the other.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually want to go back to Genesis, because when God creates Adam, he creates Adam and all the animals, and he's got this whole creation, and he says it's good.
Yeah.
Everything God creates, he says it's good, apart from the fact that Adam was alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then he created Eve out of Adam, right, as a helpmeet. Now, this word helpmeet is a very strong word. It's not necessarily insubordinate. It's actually it's not a lesser than word, but it's the similar word, isergenechto. It's a similar word that's used for Jesus, the Savior.
Wow.
Right? But the difference in the way this time the word is used, it can be rephrased as a savior or a person of strength with equal standing. So that second part is like a mirror. Okay, so it's very clear when God describes Eve's role in the context of Adam that she's an equal. Okay, so equal value, but different roles.
Yeah,
and I think what the church and even history has got wrong. Jesus was a real strong proponent for justice, and the culture that day really oppressed women.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you see Jesus do is actually exalt women. It was a woman who first told about the resurrection of Jesus. It was there's so many encounters where God actually elevates the woman who in that culture was really not allowed a voice.
Yeah.
Okay. But this idea of equal value but different roles is so important. And I think where people have got it wrong is they assume that because there's a different role, like maybe a leader role, that the value is lower on the other part. And so this whole idea of equity is really God's idea. We're equal partners, but we've got different responsibilities.
Yeah, exactly. And that the definition that you did there of savior, I'm thinking, well, that makes sense to me because I know in myself, yes, Jesus has made a huge difference in my life, but actually in my marriage relationship, I am so much a better person of myself because of what my wife brings to that relationship, that there is an aspect of encouraging each other in faith and encouraging each other in terms of servanthood, of course.
Yeah, and look, the other word that comes to mind is this idea of surrender and submission and yielding. I'll use these 3 words and I'll expand on this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let's start with yielding. This idea of yielding, it means being soft. If you think of a sponge, and if I put my finger on a sponge, it sort of gives way a little bit. So it's soft. When we are called, and marriage ultimately is a description of our relationship to Jesus. When we are called to yield to Jesus, it's actually saying we soften our hearts and we surrender to his call for our lives, and let's say, Lord, you're in charge, not me. Okay. So how do you apply this to marriage? Well, yielding, when the Bible talks about wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord, that can be taken out of context. I'll just add to that the husbands are called to lay down their lives, just like Jesus did. So I know who's doing the greater sacrifice there. I'd probably argue it's the men. The men have a greater responsibility. But I think there's something special in the way God designed it. The yielding, the surrender, actually takes the pressure off of the woman in the relationship. And if we do it God's way, the strength comes from the team of the two working together. And I'll just add with this last bit on that comment, that thought is the word submission used in the context of a husband-wife relationship actually refers to a battle formation. When you're in the army and you've got a strategic plan and a battle formation, you need to, the team needs to align in a certain way to be effective and to have protection and to fulfill their purpose. And so this word does not at all mean that someone is more important than the other one. It's just, these are the positions we're trying to assume. And then as a team, we're going forward.
Wow, that's a wonderful picture. And some people, they think submission, that has started many an argument, that particular word, and for somebody to say, oh, well, this person is submissive and this person is dominant, that means that this person makes all of the rules. In the wrong context, back to what you were saying about at the beginning, in the wrong context, a misinterpretation of what this means can lead to abuse, and tragically has in some cases. But a correct understanding of this, and I love this sort of the battle formation, that as you're standing in lockstep with each other, one supporting the other as you move forward, that's a position of power for both of you.
Yeah, and maybe as a last comment on this topic, it is, and there's so much more that we actually need to unpack in this one. But I think it's so important to realize there's no place for selfishness in a marriage. And if you add that ingredient to the mix, then you don't have a problem about selfishness or oppression, because the goal of the husband and the wife is to serve one another and to seek each other's best and to become one. So this thing really breaks down, this position thing really breaks down when selfishness is involved. So let's just get rid of that and follow God's design and see a flourishing marriage, flourishing relationship, family, and society.
Yeah, certainly, and serving each other in that space, and certainly to honor and to love each other as Christ loved the church. Again, that's a very high calling on the guys. By the way, if we think about how much Jesus loved us, then that is our very high calling for the way in which we should love our wives. Certainly some challenges and a wonderful perspective, wonderful spotlight on equity and what that looks like in a practical way. Wynand, thank you so much for the work that you do at Family Life. Of course, people can find out more about that ministry at familylife.nz. But thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.